Developing at this hour, a senior official tells CNN U.S. intelligence indicates Russia is amassing more forces around Ukraine for possible military action this week. The U.S. now believes that Russian military action would begin with air and missile attacks, and then they plan to surround Ukraine's capital city very quickly. The Pentagon's press secretary reacting to this reporting just moments ago on the show.
If he wants to choose a very conventional, large-scale military action in Ukraine, that is certainly one way he could do that. I would also tell you, Kate, that we need to be on the lookout for other ways in which this incursion could start. It could start with a hybrid type of activity, like we saw in the Donbass in 2015, the so-called Little Green Men. It could start with cyber attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and utilities, that kind of thing, transportation. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways that Mr. Putin could do this, and we agree with Mr. Sullivan completely that it could happen any day now. In fact, I think we all need to be prepared for the fact that it could happen with little to no warning.
Joining me right now is CNN national security analyst David Sanger. He's a correspondent for the New York Times, of course, and also with us, retired U.S. Army Major General Dana Pittard. He's the author of the book Hunting the Caliphate. David, what do you make of what we just heard from John Kirby when he was on earlier this hour about the possibilities here?
Well, I think the first thing that I drew from that was he was saying they could do all of the above. Right? There's no reason, given what the forces that they've arrayed out there, that they need to choose. I think if Putin's goal is really that he just wants to make sure he installs a friendly government in Ukraine, he might want to see if a combination of the cyber attacks that Mr. Kirby mentioned, bringing down the power grid and so forth, and the threat of these actual physical invasions could collapse the government. And then he could step it up. It was interesting that the reporting though indicates encircling Kiev. They don't want to get, we think, into an urban guerrilla battle. And, you know, those don't work out well. They remember Afghanistan well. It's not even clear how long they would want to stay in Ukraine. But if they left, it's not clear the government they installed would be able to hold on.
So interesting. In general, CNN's latest reporting is that this U.S. intelligence suggests the invasion would be air and missile attacks, as we've just been discussing. What do you think of this?
Good morning, Kate. And in fact, I think that there's a lot of merit to that. I mean, they've got Russian forces surround Ukraine on really three sides. It depends on what the overall objective is. If it's to take a portion of the country in the east, then I see that. However, what it could also be is the forces that are arrayed to the east could in fact be a holding force. Same thing with the naval forces in the south could be there to hold Ukrainian forces in place when in fact the objective could in fact be the capital, Kyiv. So they have a couple of options there. Again, I think it's going to be a huge strategic blunder to attack Ukraine, but it appears that that's probably going to happen. If the unconfirmed reports that from Russian state media are correct, that the Russian embassy in Kyiv is evacuating personnel, it looks like it'll happen sooner rather than later.
And another element of this, David, is Jake Sullivan was asked over the weekend about the Biden administration's allegation that the Russians could be using a false flag attack in order to give justification, if you will, to invade Ukraine. And also, but Sullivan was also asked about not offering up more evidence of this intelligence. Let me play what he said.
We're not putting forward this intelligence to start a war, which has happened in the past, Jake. We are putting forward this intelligence to stop a war. And I think that fundamentally gives it, at the outset, a different level of credibility.
I thought that was really interesting because they've been facing questions on this for like a week now. What do you think of that?
Well, what he was saying is, this isn't Iraq.
Exactly.
We're not trying to create a premise for U.S. forces doing anything. And in fact, the president has said U.S. forces aren't going to be in this, even if the Russians do invade, not even to rescue American citizens. That said, you can only expose Russian disinformation and proposed activities for so many times before the Russians come back and say, well, you said we were going to do X and we didn't do it. And so, you know, you're making this up. And you heard the Russian foreign ministry try to do this over the weekend. I think they're on pretty solid ground, but I also think at some point they're going to have to show their homework and explain why it is that they say these things are going to happen.
That's a good point. I'm going to put up two maps really quickly, General, to help everyone kind of understand what this threat looks like right now over here. Here's a helpful map showing how Russian forces have been building up on three sides of Ukraine, to the south, to the east, and to the north in Belarus. And then there's also this map that we put together to show like the most recent movements. You got Russian military exercises in Belarus in the north. You've got 6 Russian assault ships moved into the south. That's according to the Russian Defense Ministry, on top of the 100,000 Russian troops that we've been told have been moved into place. Where do you expect, would you expect to see movement first?
I would expect to see movement, again, depending on the objective. If the objective is Kyiv, I would expect to see movement in the east initially, again, to hold Ukrainian forces in place so that they don't move to reinforce the capital, and or movement in the south from the naval side, again, to keep Ukrainian forces in place. As what's been mentioned earlier, it may start with a cyber attack, followed by guerrilla-type forces, maybe. And then we may see artillery moving up. We then will see air defense elements to make sure that their ground forces have an easy way through. So it depends on what the objective is. But I would expect to see the initial forces moving, the Russian forces moving in the east of Ukraine.
General, it's always great to have you. Thank you so much. David, thank you for being here. It's good to
Thank
see you.
you.
Coming up for us.